In this tutorial, I will show you how to use the mod tool and how to add your own custom blocks to the game. If you have a look at your Steam, it's probably gonna look like this, and we first need to find the mod tool. So we need to click this button up here, and then we can select tools, which is gonna show the mod tool in the list. Now, we can just search for mod tool, and it has a green barring. Once you found it, right click on it, and ideally you wanna add it to favorites, and then it's just always gonna show up on the top here if you actually, show the tools. Once you found the mod tool, you can just click launch, and it's gonna open up a new window. Now let's pretend I didn't make any mods before, so we're gonna start by making a new mod. For this, we go in the top left corner, we click File, New Mod, and we're just gonna start with a simple Blocks and Parts mod. Then we just need to name our mod. Click OK, and we've got a new mod. Now, the next step we need to do before we can start adding blocks is we have to take a look at the file list over here. We need to click on Shape Database and select this file over here, which is called shapesets.shapedb. Then we have a new window popping up on the right side of the screen. You can resize everything here. So now we linked up a shapeset file. You have a database file like the shapesets.shapedb file, which links to a bunch of shapeset files. And then we can have a look at the shapeset files over here, where we currently have our example.shapeset. Now, this is basically just an empty file. I can click Open External, which opens it up in my code editor. We're not gonna need this today, but if you want to have a look at the file itself, you can have a look at the file itself. And yeah, it's literally just empty. Now, with the mod tool, we can easily add new parts. So we have the window on the top right. Now we can click on Shapeset over here, right click, and then there's a new add button. And since we just want to add some blocks, we're just gonna click add block list. Now this is gonna add a list filled with blocks. Now to make this block work, we first want a new UUID. So every item in the game has a unique ID, and since it has to be unique, we don't want the default UUID, because that's already used for air, I think, in the game files. So you can just right click on UUID and click generate new UUID. And if we click this button, we get a random UUID, and we're good. Next, we have to add some textures to our block. Now, I'm gonna explain how they work in a second. For now, we're just gonna use some textures that are already in the game. And to locate our game folder, we can just click on Scrap Mechanic in Steam, right click on it, and select Manage Browse Local Files. This is gonna open up a new window in File Explorer. And again, we can just copy the address path like this. Then we click the plus file symbol, paste in our Scrap Mechanic path. This is gonna lead us to the Scrap Mechanic folder. Now we can find the textures for the blocks in the data folder. So we go data, then it's in the objects folder, textures, blocks, and conveniently we have the bricks block right here. Now I'm just gonna assign the ASG texture from the brick block. Remember, I'll explain what these textures actually are in a second. For now, we're just gonna link up some textures so it's gonna look like something. Right, we can leave the physics material and tiling at these default values for now. And now, again, remember we need to save the file, else we're not gonna see any changes in the game. And now I think we're ready to launch Scrap Mechanic. Before we launch Scrap Mechanic, it's also really helpful if we enable the Dev console. To do this, we just right click on Scrap Mechanic, Properties, and you can see this field which is called Launch Options. Basically, all we want to type in here is -dev, and this is gonna launch the Dev console when we launch Scrap Mechanic. Now, if you want to play multiplayer, you can just delete this, and then you can join normal, or both players need to have the Dev console enabled, I think. I don't know, maybe they fixed it in the meantime? If the game says like there's mismatching developer flags, it has to do with this setting. And this is gonna be much more helpful for scripting later, but I'll just show you what it does. So if we now launch Scrap Mechanic, you're gonna see that a console window opens. Now this tells us a lot of stuff about the game, like it even tells me the loading screen time in seconds, but this is a debug console, so we really just need it if we have errors. So let's just see if our mod just works. So as you can see, blocks go brr is showing up in the mod section over here. Just select the mod, create a new world, just as usual. Now it's gonna say nobody can join because we did not upload the mod yet. We're gonna upload the mod at the end, don't worry. And now let's see if this actually works. Let's click on mod parts, and oh my god, it actually works. I didn't test this before, so this is great. Now, so we have a new block in game. It doesn't have an icon, and it just looks like a brick block. That's because I've used the brick textures. And yeah, you just made your first mod, and it's so much easier than having to mess with the files. We just had to link to some files so far. Now I think it's time to mess with some properties of the block. Now, one property that I left at default is called physics material. We can change this, for example, to glass. If we then save the file, I need to reload the world. We now hit this thing with the hammer. It should make glass sounds. Yeah, I think you can hear it. Maybe glass sounds a little bit weird. But this also changes the particle effect when I punch it sometimes, or when it destroys. So I think if I blow this up with explosive, it's gonna shatter or something. Yeah, okay, that didn't really do that, but this is what physics material should do. Next in the list, we have tiling. Now, this is gonna control how many blocks you need to place before the texture repeats. So if I change this to 1, which, I don't know, maybe this is gonna work, maybe not. Let's find out. Oh yeah, you can see it very well in the preview. Now, because the tiling is 1, it means the entire texture is applied to a 1x1 cube. So this is gonna look the same as an 8x8 block of the normal brick texture, because the tiling is 8 by default, but because I changed it to 1, it repeats on every single block. Which, yeah, this looks pretty weird. Now, we can again, of course, add new properties to this. So if I click add, we can, for example, add a color. Now, this is gonna be the default color of the block. So if I change this to FF0000, this is just a hex code for a color. If you just Google color picker, Google Chrome has one that's built in. So you could basically just, you know, slide around here, find a color that you like, and then just copy the hex code. Make sure you do not include the hashtag, and then just paste it down here, and this is gonna control the default color of the block. So if we now load back into the world, you see nothing has changed because this is already colored. But if I place a new block now, it's all just red. Now, how much you can paint a block depends on the texture. Right, so what I now did is make the block invisible. You might be wondering how I did it. So I just added an alpha property over here, and I think you use this to make glass. Okay, my bad, it's not used to make glass. So I now opened up the shape set for survival blocks. This is actually how the file looks later in the file, but you don't need to worry about it. The UI of the module handles everything. But what we have here is the metal net block, which is this net block over here. What you actually see is this wing is completely transparent, and this is what the alpha property does. Now, why is our block invisible? It's because we do not have the right textures for it. So if you want a block that is invisible like a metal net block, I would recommend just copying the textures of the normal metal net block. But yeah, we're not gonna need it for now. Now, there's a flammable property we can add. So when the devs ever add fire physics to the game, this is how you can make a block flammable or not. Next up, we have a glass property. If I just tick this, we should get a translucency effect, transparency, something like that. Remember, always save the file, else it's not gonna happen. So first of all, it now says flammable, yes. Yeah, I really hope we're gonna see the fire physics at some point. But you can see, because I ticked the glass true, we actually have transparency now on the block, which actually looks kinda interesting. And of course, we can color it to our liking as well. So yeah, this is how you make glass-like blocks. I mean, this is basically just a glass block, but with a brick texture on top of it. This is why it looks so weird. Next, we have a name property, which is pretty simple. Let's just name it, these blocks. Yeah, of course, I keep reloading the game every time I make changes, because it doesn't apply them instantly. So, at least if you're just messing with the block properties, it's enough to reload your world. Now you see, it actually says these blocks as a title. And yeah, I had a grass physics material before, so now it actually sounds like glass. I mean, grass and glass, it's pretty hard to see on my big monitor. Interesting that red and green make black. Next, we have this ratings property, which is the most interesting stuff. So this adds a whole new object thing down here. And to actually add properties, we need to click on this. Then we can click add buoyancy, add density, add durability, and add friction. And as you might guess, these are the properties you see in the preview. So if I just make everything at max, we now have a very heavy, very durable, very high friction, and very buoyant block. So this is actually gonna be really heavy. So if I punch this with my hammer, yeah, it barely moves at all. And because the friction is so high, it's basically impossible to move it with my hammer. Now, if I change everything to 1, things are gonna be very different. So not only do I break blocks, this slides like ice because the friction is so incredibly low. And it's also so lightweight that just punching it gives a lot of momentum. Yeah, this is basically a land sled now. Oh my god, what just happened? It just got yeeted by the collision because it's so lightweight. Oh my god, it got all the way over there. I'm just gonna make all of these average, which is gonna be a lot easier to test the next property with, because we can also add restitution, which is gonna control the bounciness of the block. Currently it's 0.0, which I think means 0 bounciness. Now I'm gonna add it to 0.69, which should give the block some bounciness. So let's place our block over here, a concrete block for comparison. And now I'm just gonna delete the net blocks, and you'll see what starts happening. Okay, you see it's very shaky on the ground for much longer. You know, I'm gonna try and build a small ball out of this, and yeah, you can see the bounciness. Let's take it to a much higher level, like 0.99. Now if I punch this block around, it keeps bouncing. At least it should keep bouncing. Alright, let's have a look at this. You can really tell it's quite bouncy now. Now of course we can also go higher than 1, but I think if it gets too high, it's basically just gonna be a particle accelerator. So if I'm now gonna drop a block, oh my god, it keeps jumping higher and higher. So yeah, you can make a block that keeps bouncing more and more and more. It's all possible now with the mod tool. Like, this is kind of fun. These properties were added with the latest update. We couldn't mess with them before, so I really wonder what you can build with all of this bounciness. Anyway, that part is up to you. I'm just gonna show you how stuff works, so I'm gonna keep it at 0. I need the blocks. Oh! I didn't know this was a thing. So apparently if you hover your mouse over the textures, it will actually show you what the textures look like. That's really interesting. I didn't know this was a thing. Alright, we can add a restrictions property, and this one is just like the ratings, and we can add stuff like buildable, connectable. Like, I'm just gonna add them all, and then I tell you what they do. But yeah, if you actually want them to work, you need to disable all of these, then it's actually gonna change stuff. So the first thing you will notice is that if I have regular blocks, I can still build on top of them. But because buildable is set to false, I cannot build any blocks on the blocks. Now connectable makes it so I cannot connect stuff, but you know, this is not an interactable. We'll get to that stuff later. Now convertible to dynamic is gonna make it so if I now remove the lift, yeah, this did not work, but because I said liftable to false, I cannot put these blocks on the lift. It's impossible. So convertible to dynamic is gonna make it so if I delete blocks, they will just keep floating. So you could use this to build flying bases if you wanted to, because whenever you place blocks on the terrain, they're gonna be static. So you know, you cannot move these blocks no matter how hard you push it. But if you make them loose, they become a dynamic object, meaning I can now just eat these blocks around. But because this can't be converted to dynamic, it's always gonna be static. Destructible is pretty self-explanatory. It just means you cannot destroy the block. Even if, you know, there's explosives or stuff like that, it's just gonna stay. Erasable means I cannot delete the block. I'm pressing the button right now and I cannot delete it. Liftable just means you cannot put it on the lift. And yes, even if there's just one part that isn't liftable on a creation, you cannot lift the entire creation. So if I now cut this thing out, I should be able to, yeah, lift the rest. Paintable just makes it so I cannot paint parts, although it's actually showing the animation, which is, I don't know, this should not really happen, but yeah, it's not actually changing the color. Lastly, usable makes it so you cannot interact with an object, which also only applies to interactive parts like this. So you could have an engine that you can't interact with. Now, I do not like the restrictions, so if you do not like a property, you can also just right click and press delete, which is gonna delete all of it. Next, we have show in inventory and stack size. Now, if we put show in inventory to false and change the stack size to 69, we can now take a look at mod parts and we won't see anything. However, you still see I have it in my inventory. So the part is not gone, it's just hidden from our inventory. Because sometimes you have some parts that are not really meant to be used, and then you can kind of hide them that way. Now, they're also not gonna show up if you want to put them into a chest, like the entire inventory. It's just not there. Right, now I made the part visible again, so it's gonna show up in our inventory, meaning I can also put it in a chest. Alright, the blocks always show up on top. Now, if I put this into a chest and I add 222, because I put the stack size to 69, you can only have 69 of them at once. That way you can change, you know, how many parts you can stack if you want to. Now, of course, this is not really that relevant and creative, except you want to make it work on chests or something. But if you're working on survival mods, it can be really useful. Yeah, and these are all the block properties you have. Now, one thing we can also do, we can click duplicate, which is just gonna create a new block. Let's give it this new name, and I think the textures can stay the same. I'm maybe just gonna change the default color. And oh yeah, you need to remember, two parts cannot have the same UUID. So always generate a new UUID. And now if I save this, we should have 2 blocks. And this is how you could add more blocks than just one. Now you see we have these blocks and these blocks too. They all look pretty much the same, but if I place one of these blocks, it's gonna be red and the other block is gonna be green. Of course, you can change more properties than just the default color. Now, you might be wondering why I told you to open the debug console. You're probably not gonna need it much if you're just adding blocks, but for example, if I now intentionally open our shapeset file, and I'm just gonna add an error to the file, quite literally, you see there's a bunch of errors now popping up in the console. So here it says it can't deserialize a shape with this UUID because I corrupted the file, so it no longer would load. And if we actually scroll up, this is like really epic about the console. If you do more modding work, it actually prints the errors. So it says it couldn't pass the file over here. If I scroll down, it says it's line 47, column 7. It's missing some declaration here for the file structure. Now, obviously, you're not gonna manually mess with the file if you're just adding blocks. But if you're having any errors, like if structures do not load in, blocks start to look funny like this, maybe have a look in the debug console, and there might be an error that tells you what might be wrong. Right now, I'm gonna give you a quick tutorial on how textures work. And to make this more visible, I'm gonna disable the glass property. And I'm also gonna copy the brick files. Then remember, you can just click File, Open Location, and it's gonna lead you to your mod folder. I'm just gonna make a new folder in the Objects folder for textures. This is a good idea if you wanna organize stuff. And I'm gonna paste all these files in here. Now, I could probably also change the name. If you rename them, make sure you keep the last 3 letters like ASG, diff, and NOAA. I don't think it's strictly necessary, but it's gonna help you a lot to know what texture that actually is. So now we need to link to the new textures. So I'll just need to copy the path again. Go to our objects folders where I've added the textures, and okay, you need to match ASG with ASG, of course. Now these are gonna look the same for now. Now I'm gonna start with the diff texture. Now to manipulate these textures, you're gonna need an image editing program. I'm currently using GIMP, but maybe you wanna look for a better program, because GIMP has a few issues. So this is now the texture of the brick, and one thing that's really interesting is that the bricks do not have any color, because everything you leave empty in here, you can later paint. So I'm now just gonna do a very simple thing, just drawing my name onto the texture. If we then overwrite the file, we again need to reload the world. You see, we suddenly have a very different texture. And the debug console even says there was a cache miss and stuff. You know, if you get deeper into modding, you're really gonna love the debug console. Like, the textures should update automatically if it detects that the file was changed. If they don't, you might want to have a look in your mods folder and delete stuff in the cache folder, because it caches the textures, so it doesn't have to generate them every time. But yeah, just as I told you, the DPP is always gonna be cyan, no matter what I color the block. And you can see there's still some kind of a brick texture on here. Now, this has to do with the NOAA texture. So this is a normal map that kinda adds fake depth to your texture. Now, if you do proper modeling, you know how to get this stuff. I don't, so there's tools out there like smart normal map generators. And now I exported the diff texture as a PNG. If I upload it to this file, it creates empty normal map. Now, this is one of my thumbnails, and you can really see it's doing a lot more work here, like adding some fake depth to the image. Now, I'm just gonna make the entire normal map a solid color, which completely removes any depth, and you're gonna see that the brick things are gone. So now this is really smooth. Like, I really removed all of the texture, so it's not very interesting to look at. Well, if you have very sharp eyes, which it's gonna be hard to tell with YouTube compression, but you can still see something that looks like bricks on my blocks. Now, this has to do with the ASG texture. Again, you might be wondering now, this looks like an empty file, but there's actually stuff in here. Now, I'm just gonna clear the entire layer. You see, there was a slight change in color. They do a pretty good job of explaining ASG textures on the modding page of the Scrap Mechanic wiki. So we have different channels we control, which, you know, create a color, and these are used to control transparency of a texture, control the speculiar level, the glow, and reflectiveness. Now, I showed you there's this alpha property which made my block invisible. So to control how invisible things should be, you can just adjust the red level of the color you paint stuff with. See, I just drew a smiley over here. And oh, you can actually see. You can see the smiley, but it's not exactly transparent. Alright, let's re-enable the alpha property. And there you go. Now, everything is invisible except what I colored solid red. So yeah, this is exactly how this works. Now, if you want to build your own grid like the net block, this is how you would do it. Now, the green channel is going to control the specular level of a texture. So let's turn green to 100 and everything else. You know, this is just the greenest green you can have. What you're gonna see, this is gonna be very speculiar, and I know why stuff looks so weird. Actually, you can control the alpha channel, which in this case is my opacity. So if I turn this down a little bit, you can see, yeah, it's just very transparent, the green. You can see the smiley, it's hidden on the... You know, depending, for example, how light hits the blocks, it's gonna be more or less visible. So if you want some kind of metallic look, I think you want a lot of this stuff. The blue channel will control the glow of the texture. So if I change my color to 100 blue, we can again draw another smiley. And yeah, you're gonna see it's gonna glow quite a bit. Now if I change the time to night, I don't know, yeah, you can really tell tell the difference. You can also see how the terrain texture has some specular level stuff. Because, you know, if I look down at the floor, everything lights up. And if I look away, it doesn't light up. So, you know, this is just a normal texture as well. Alright, and lastly we have the alpha channel, which controls the reflectivity. Now, I'm gonna turn all the colors to 0, which is gonna create black. And now I need to turn my opacity up to maximum, so it's gonna be a solid color. Now, this is gonna make the entire block reflective. So essentially, I've now built a mirror. Now, yeah, it doesn't look that great with my normal texture, but if I change the time to night, you can really see some kind of difference. So the reflectivity kind of depends on the daylight. You also don't want to overdo it like I did, but you know, you see metal, for example, has quite some specular level and reflectivity. Just makes stuff look shiny. Right now, maybe we want to give this stuff a proper name. And I mean, of course, a description too. For this, the mod tool is our friend as well. So you see there's an inventory description set. And if I click on this file, you can see it opens up our inventory description set. Yeah, now we can rename things, but for this, we need to give it the UUID. So let's copy the UUID of our These Blocks block. Then we can click rename up here, and we just click rename. We're gonna paste it, Control V. Okay, this is my mod path. Right, you cannot copy stuff in the module this way, so we just need to do the old Control C, Control V. And one thing we can also do is we can click Add Description. And now if I save the file, it actually is gonna, yeah, it says shape title instead of These Blocks. Oh my god, you can really see the reflectivity in the preview. And we also have a description which says These what? These Blocks. Now if you want to add translation for another language, you need to go to the GUI language folder and name it after your language. It needs to have the same name as one of the languages in-game. Now to refresh the mod, we just need to open it again in the mod tool. Alright, I've now did this, so it's just now gonna say, you know, the shape title, these what, we know this. If I now go and change my language, it's also gonna say my custom description I just wrote. So the only thing that's left to do is to generate the icons. Now to do this, we need to go up here and click share, which is gonna open this dialog menu thing. And there's a thing that's called icons down here. We can extend it, and if I click this button, create icons, you see it just created a new icon map, and voila, we have items for our blocks. Right, so now our custom block mod is done, and if we're ready to upload to the workshop, we just click upload to Steam. Now it might sometimes say there's errors, but then you can still try and upload it nonetheless and see if it works. Now keep in mind the default visibility is always hidden, so it means nobody else can download the mod. So if you want to make it so your friends can play it, you need to select the change the visibility to friends only or unlisted. And if you want to publish it for everyone to see, you just set it to public. And then everyone can download your amazing mod. Oh yeah, and if you have a look in the mods folder, there's a preview.jpg. And this is gonna later be the thumbnail on the workshop. So if you want to change it, you just change the file, upload it again, and yep, that's all you really need to know to make your own custom blocks. Let me know if you have any more questions, and also if you want to see more tutorials for more advanced stuff, like adding your own scripted parts and so on. And if I wasn't lazy, there should be a whole series of modding tutorials for you. And yeah, you can watch the next part of the series right in this end screen, which definitely exists. Have fun modding.